They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when your own family treats your love like a subscription service they never bothered to cancel for 2 years? I'd been their silent ATM, their free babysitter, their emergency contact for everything until the day my sister's hand met my face for daring to say no. That slap didn't just sting my cheek, it shattered every illusion I'd carried about family loyalty. Sometimes the cruelest wake-up call comes from the people who are supposed to love you most. My name is Rachel Carter, and at 34, I should have been living my own life. Instead, I was drowning in everyone else's. The alarm shrieked at 5:30 every morning in my cramped studio apartment on Maple Street, pulling me from whatever restless sleep I'd managed to catch. By 6:15, I was already dressed in my navy blazer and sensible flats, clutching a travel mug of bitter coffee as I rushed to catch the 7:10 bus to Brookford Insurance Group. The building squatted like a gray concrete tumor in the heart of downtown Brookford, Oregon, and I'd been feeding its endless appetite for paperwork and phone calls for the past 8 years. My desk sat in a maze of beige cubicles on the 3rd floor, where fluorescent lights hummed their monotonous tune above stacks of claim forms and policy renewals. As a senior administrative coordinator, I juggled everything from processing accident reports to fielding angry calls from clients whose coverage had been denied. The work was mind-numbing, but it paid $42,000 a year, barely enough to cover my own expenses, let alone the financial black hole that had become my family. Most days, I'd wolf down a sad desk salad around 1 o'clock, then dive back into the endless stream of emails and phone calls until 5:30. But instead of going home to collapse on my second-hand couch like any normal person, I'd drive the 12 minutes across town to the house on Oakwood Drive where I grew up, the house that was slowly eating my bank account alive. The 2-story colonial with its peeling white paint and sagging front porch had been Mom's pride and joy once upon a time. Now it was a monument to neglect, with gutters that overflowed every winter and a lawn that grew wild because nobody bothered to mow it. Mom Evelyn Carter had been collecting disability checks since her back surgery 3 years ago, though she seemed perfectly capable of binge-watching Netflix for 12 hours straight without any apparent discomfort. My sister Megan lived there too, along with her 6-year-old son Tyler. At 28, Megan had perfected the art of floating through life without any real responsibilities. She'd bounce between part-time retail jobs, usually quitting when a manager asked her to work weekends or stay past closing time. Her latest boyfriend, Derek, was a 30-something wannabe musician who spent his days smoking weed in the garage and his nights playing video games until 3 in the morning. Every evening around 6:15, I'd pull into that familiar driveway and feel my stomach clench with the same mixture of duty and resentment. The house always smelled like stale cigarettes and whatever frozen dinner someone had microwaved for lunch. Mom would be parked in her recliner, remote in hand, offering me a distracted wave without looking away from whatever reality show was ruining her brain cells. Megan would be sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, occasionally barking orders at Tyler to stop making noise or go play in his room. "Oh, good, you're here," became Megan's standard greeting, as if my arrival was as predictable as the sunset. "Tyler needs dinner, and we're out of everything again." So I'd roll up my sleeves and get to work. I'd check what was left in the refrigerator, usually expired milk, condiment packets, and maybe some wilted lettuce, then drive to the Safeway on Pine Street to pick up groceries. Real groceries, fresh vegetables, protein, bread that wasn't growing mold. I'd come back and cook an actual meal while Tyler did his homework at the kitchen table, the only person in that house who seemed genuinely happy to see me. After dinner, there would be dishes to wash, laundry to sort, bills to review. I'd help Tyler with his math homework or read him a bedtime story while Mom and Megan remained glued to their respective screens. By the time I locked the front door behind me, it was usually past 9:30, and I still had to drive home, shower, and try to prepare for another day of the same exhausting routine. But the real weight crushing my shoulders wasn't the daily grind. It was the money. For the past 2 years and 4 months, I'd been covering the mortgage payments on the Oakwood Drive house, $1,800 a month, every month, automatically deducted from my checking account like clockwork. Then there were the utility bills: electric, gas, water, trash pickup, internet, cable, another $400 to $500 monthly, depending on how high Mom cranked the heat or how many streaming services Megan decided she needed. I'd done the math more times than I cared to admit, usually lying awake at 3 in the morning while anxiety gnawed at my chest. $91,847. That's what I'd paid to keep their lives comfortable while my own savings account withered like a neglected houseplant. I'd started eating ramen noodles for dinner to stretch my grocery budget. I'd been wearing the same 3 blazers to work for over a year because I couldn't afford new clothes. My car was making alarming noises that I couldn't afford to have fixed. Meanwhile, Megan somehow always had money for new makeup palettes and weekend trips to Portland with Derek. Mom's disability checks seemed to evaporate on QVC purchases and takeout orders, but there was never enough left over to contribute to the household expenses that kept them housed and fed. The worst part wasn't even the money, it was the silence. Not once, in all those months of automatic payments and grocery runs and unpaid babysitting, had anyone said thank you. My sacrifices had become as invisible as wallpaper, as expected as sunrise. I was the family's unpaid personal assistant, and somewhere along the way, love had curdled into obligation. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was being a good daughter, a good sister. I told myself that family meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant love. I was wrong about everything. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in late September, after what had been one of the longest days of my professional life. A system crash at Brookford Insurance had left me fielding angry calls from 9 in the morning until nearly 7 at night, with clients screaming about delayed claim payments and threatening to switch carriers. My head was pounding, my feet were killing me in those damn sensible flats, and all I wanted was to go home, order Chinese takeout, and fall asleep watching something mindless on Netflix. But routine is a cruel master, and mine demanded that I stop by Oakwood Drive first. I sat in my dented Honda Civic for a full minute in the driveway, engine ticking as it cooled, gathering the energy to face whatever chaos waited inside. Through the living room window, I could see the familiar blue glow of the television painting Mom's face in sickly light. The front yard looked like a tornado had hit it. Tyler's bike lying on its side next to a scattered pile of Derek's cigarette butts and empty beer cans. The front door was unlocked, as always. Security had never been a priority in a house where no one seemed to own anything worth stealing. Rachel. Tyler's voice cut through the stale air as he barreled toward me, his small arms wrapping around my waist with the kind of pure joy that used to make all the sacrifice feel worthwhile. At 6 years old, he was the only innocent in this whole mess, caught between a mother who treated him like an inconvenience and a grandmother who treated him like background noise. "Hey, buddy," I said, ruffling his dark hair that desperately needed a trim. "How was school today?" "Mrs. Patterson said I'm really good at math." His gap-toothed grin was infectious, and for a moment, I forgot about the exhaustion weighing down my bones. "Can you help me with my homework after dinner?" "We'll see," I said, because dinner hadn't magically appeared while I was at work, and someone would need to conjure it from the barren wasteland that passed for their kitchen. Mom looked up from her recliner long enough to grunt a greeting. She was wearing the same oversized flannel shirt she'd had on yesterday, her graying hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that suggested she hadn't showered in days. The coffee table in front of her was littered with empty soda cans, crumpled tissues, and what looked like the remnants of a microwave burrito. "Oh, good, you're here," Megan called from the couch without looking up from her phone. She was sprawled across the cushions in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair perfectly styled, despite supposedly not having anywhere to be. "Tyler's been asking for dinner for like an hour, and there's literally nothing to eat in this house." I bit back the urge to ask why she hadn't taken her son to McDonald's or ordered pizza like any normal parent might do. Instead, I trudged to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, revealing the usual suspects' expired yogurt, half a bottle of ketchup, some suspicious-looking deli meat, and a gallon of milk that smelled questionable when I gave it a tentative sniff. "Megan," I called, opening and closing cabinet doors to find them mostly bare except for a box of stale crackers and some canned soup that was probably older than Tyler. "When's the last time anyone went grocery shopping?" "I don't know," she replied with the casual indifference of someone who had never been responsible for feeding another human being. "Maybe Derek picked up some stuff yesterday. You know I've been super busy with work." This was news to me, since I was pretty sure Megan had been fired from her latest retail job 2 weeks ago for showing up late one too many times. But I'd learned not to ask too many questions about my sister's employment status, because the answers usually involved elaborate explanations about unfair managers and workplace discrimination that had nothing to do with her own behavior. I grabbed my purse and keys, resigned to another trip to Safeway. "I'll be back in 20 minutes with food." "Can you get the good mac and cheese?" Tyler asked hopefully. "The kind with the powder cheese, not the liquid stuff." "Sure, sweetheart." "And don't forget Derek likes those frozen burritos," Megan added, still not bothering to look up from whatever social media drama was consuming her attention. "The spicy ones, not the regular." The grocery run cost me $43 I couldn't really spare. But Tyler needed to eat, and I couldn't stand the thought of him going to bed hungry because the adults in his life couldn't be bothered to function like responsible human beings. I bought chicken nuggets and mac and cheese for him, sandwich meat and bread for lunches, milk that wasn't a science experiment, and yes, Derek's precious frozen burritos. When I got back, the house looked exactly the same, except Tyler had migrated to the floor in front of the TV, where he was building something elaborate with Legos while Mom and Megan continued their respective screen time marathons. Nobody offered to help me carry in the groceries. I cooked the nuggets and mac and cheese, made Tyler a plate, and set it down at the kitchen table. "Come eat, buddy." "Can I eat in the living room?" he asked. "There's a really good show on." "Kitchen table," I said firmly, because someone in this house needed to maintain basic standards of civilization. We've talked about this. While Tyler ate, I started preparing sandwiches for tomorrow's lunch, his and mine, since I'd apparently become responsible for feeding myself in addition to everyone else. Megan wandered into the kitchen, opened one of Derek's burritos, and stuck it in the microwave. You know," she said, leaning against the counter while she waited for the timer to ding. "I've been thinking you should really update your wardrobe. That blazer you always wear makes you look like a secretary from the 1980s. I paused in my sandwich making, a slice of turkey halfway to the bread. "Excuse me." "I'm just saying, no wonder you can't find a boyfriend. You dress like someone's spinster aunt." She pulled her burrito from the microwave and peeled back the wrapper, completely oblivious to the effect her words were having on me. "Maybe if you made more of an effort, you wouldn't spend every night alone in that depressing little apartment." The turkey slice dropped from my suddenly numb fingers. "Are you seriously criticizing how I dress?" "Don't get all defensive. I'm trying to help." Megan took a bite of her burrito, made a face, and reached for the hot sauce. "Derek was just saying the other day that you could be pretty if you tried. Maybe some makeup, contacts instead of those glasses, clothes that actually fit your body." The room started to tilt slightly, like I was standing on the deck of a ship in rough waters. Derek was talking about my appearance. "Oh my God, Rachel, chill out. It wasn't mean or anything. We were just saying that you seem lonely, and maybe if you put yourself out there more, made an effort to look approachable." She shrugged like she was offering profound wisdom instead of casually shredding what was left of my self-esteem. I looked down at my navy blazer, the one I'd bought on clearance at Nordstrom Rack 2 years ago, and had been rotating with my other 2 work blazers ever since, because my clothing budget had been consumed by their mortgage payments. I thought about my apartment, which wasn't depressing so much as it was all I could afford after subsidizing their lives. I thought about Derek, a man who couldn't hold down a job or be bothered to shower regularly, critiquing my appearance like he was some kind of authority on attractiveness. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice sounding strange and far away. "I should make more of an effort." Megan brightened, apparently missing the dangerous undertone in my agreement. See, I knew you'd understand. Maybe this weekend we could go shopping together. I know all the best places. With what money, I wanted to ask. The money I've been spending to keep you housed and fed. But I didn't say anything. I just finished making Tyler's lunch, wrapped it in plastic, and put it in the refrigerator next to mine. Aunt Rachel. Tyler appeared in the doorway, his plate clean except for a few stray noodles. Can we read a story now? Of course, sweetheart. I took his hand and led him upstairs to his bedroom, leaving Megan to finish her critique of my life choices in peace. As I read Tyler a book about dragons and brave knights, I realized something that should have been obvious much sooner. I had become the dragon in this story, hoarding gold that everyone else felt entitled to claim. The only difference was that dragons got to live in castles and breathe fire at people who annoyed them. I was just getting eaten alive, one small bite at a time. When I finally left the house at 10:15 that night, after helping Tyler with homework, washing dishes, and folding a load of laundry that had been sitting in the dryer for 3 days, I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. The house glowed warmly behind me, paid for by my sacrifice, inhabited by people who saw my love as a subscription service they'd never bothered to cancel. For the first time in over 2 years, I wondered what would happen if I just stopped. The ambush came on a Thursday evening, delivered with the casual cruelty that my family had perfected over the years. I'd barely made it through the front door when Megan practically bounced off the couch. Her face lit up with the kind of excitement usually reserved for lottery winners or people who'd just gotten away with murder. Rachel, perfect timing. We need to talk to you about something amazing. I should have recognized the warning signs immediately. Megan never described anything as amazing unless it involved other people doing things for her benefit. But I was tired, my guard was down, and I made the fatal mistake of engaging. "What's going on?" I asked, setting my purse down on the cluttered coffee table and noting that Mom had apparently graduated from her usual reality TV to some kind of travel documentary about tropical islands. "Okay, so you know how Derek's been working really hard lately," Megan began, which was already a lie since Derek's idea of hard work involved rolling out of bed before noon. "Well, his friend Jason has this timeshare in Maui, and he's offering to let us use it for a whole week in October. Can you believe it?" I could believe it. Actually, Derek was exactly the type of person who had friends with questionable timeshare deals and loose definitions of free vacation. What I couldn't believe was the expectation radiating from Megan's hopeful expression. "That sounds nice," I said carefully, already sensing the trap being laid. "It gets better." She clapped her hands together like a game show hostess revealing the grand prize. "Mom's been saying forever that she needs a real vacation, and Tyler's never seen the ocean. Derek says there's this amazing beach right outside the resort, and snorkeling, and a pool with a water slide." From her recliner, Mom finally chimed in without taking her eyes off the television. "Dr. Morrison said the warm weather would be good for my back. All this Oregon rain just makes the arthritis worse." I nodded along, waiting for the other shoe to drop, knowing it would be a steel-toed boot aimed directly at my face. "So here's the thing," Megan continued, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she'd perfected as a teenager when she wanted to borrow my car or money or homework to copy. "We'd be gone for 7 days, leaving on a Saturday and coming back the following Sunday. And we were thinking—" "You were thinking what?" "Well, obviously someone needs to stay here and watch the house. You know how break-ins happen when places look empty? Plus, Tyler's school projects are due the week we get back, and someone needs to make sure the bills get paid on time, and the mail needs to be collected." The trap snapped shut with audible precision. "You want me to house sit?" "Not just house sit," Megan protested, as if adding more responsibilities somehow made the request more reasonable. "Think of it as a staycation. You'd have the whole place to yourself. You could order takeout every night, watch whatever you want on TV. It would be like a vacation for you, too. A vacation that involved me working all day, then coming home to an empty house to do their chores and manage their responsibilities while they sipped Mai Tais on a beach in paradise. The audacity was breathtaking. "When is this trip supposed to happen?" I asked. "October 15th through the 22nd, Mom said, finally muting her travel show and giving me her full attention. "Derek says if we don't book by this weekend, his friend might offer it to someone else." October 15th. The date hit me like a physical blow. "That's my birthday weekend." Megan's face went blank for a moment, as if she genuinely couldn't understand why that might be relevant. "Oh, right. But you never do anything special for your birthday anyway." "That's because I've been too busy taking care of all of you to plan anything." "Look, I know it's not ideal timing," she said, employing the kind of reasonable tone people use when they're being completely unreasonable, "but opportunities like this don't come around very often. Derek says the timeshare usually books for like $2,000 a week. Then maybe Derek should pay for it himself instead of expecting me to subsidize your vacation by working as your unpaid caretaker." The temperature in the room dropped by about 20 degrees. Megan's expression shifted from wheedling to offended, while Mom turned in her chair to face me directly for the first time all evening. "Rachel, honey," Mom said in the patient voice she'd used when I was 8 and refusing to eat my vegetables, "it's not like we're asking you to sacrifice anything important. You work all week anyway, and you usually just spend your evenings here helping out. This way, you'd be helping out from a more comfortable home base. It's my birthday. Birthdays happen every year," Megan snapped, apparently done with pretending this was a reasonable request. "This timeshare deal might never happen again. Besides, what were you planning to do? Sit alone in your apartment eating takeout and watching Netflix? At least this way you'd be doing something useful." Something useful, like my entire existence was only valuable in terms of what services I could provide for their benefit. I felt something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest, like a shard of ice forming around my heart. "I was planning to take a long weekend and drive down to the coast," I said quietly. "I've been saving up for months to rent a little cabin in Cannon Beach. I was going to read books, take walks on the beach, maybe visit some of the galleries in town. Just be alone and quiet for a few days." "Oh," Megan blinked, as if the concept of me having personal desires or plans was genuinely surprising. "Well, couldn't you do that some other time? When would be convenient for me to have 3 days to myself?" "Megan, because I've been waiting for that opportunity for over 2 years now." "Don't be dramatic," Mom interjected. "Family comes first. Rachel, that's what family means. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the people you love." I looked around the living room at the bills I'd been paying stacked on the side table, at the groceries I'd bought filling their cabinets, at the mortgage payment that would automatically deduct from my account in 6 days whether I was appreciated for it or not. "What sacrifices are you making?" I asked. "Excuse me. What sacrifices are either of you making for family? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm the only one who's been sacrificing anything. I pay your mortgage, your utilities, your groceries. I cook your dinners, watch your kid, manage your household. I work 8 hours a day and then come here to work another 3 hours every night. When's the last time either of you sacrificed anything for me?" Megan's face flushed red. "That's completely different and you know it. You have a good job and no kids. Mom's on disability, and I'm barely getting by with part-time work. Of course you contribute more, you can afford to. I can afford to because I don't spend money on trips to Hawaii." "It's not Hawaii, it's Maui, and we're not spending money on it," Megan shot back. "God. Rachel, why are you being so selfish about this? We're family. Families help each other." "Help each other," I repeated slowly. "When's the last time you helped me with anything?" Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. On the muted television, palm trees swayed in an endless tropical breeze that looked like paradise from our cramped, cluttered living room in Brookford, Oregon. Finally, Mom spoke up, her voice carrying the weight of maternal authority she'd never bothered to use on Megan's behalf. "Rachel, I'm disappointed in you. I raised you better than this. Sometimes being an adult means doing things you don't want to do for the good of the family. Then maybe it's time someone else in this family started being an adult." I stood up, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Megan's voice rising to that particular pitch that meant she was gearing up for a full tantrum. "So that's it. You're just going to let us down because you want to have some sad little birthday party by yourself. Real mature, Rachel. Real mature." I turned back at the doorway, looking at these two women who shared my blood but seemed incapable of seeing me as anything more than a resource to be exploited. "The answer is no," I said. "Find someone else to watch your house. I'm going to Cannon Beach for my birthday, and for once in my life, I'm going to do something just for me." The sound of the front door closing behind me felt like the end of something I couldn't quite name yet, but as I sat in my car in their driveway, watching the warm light spill from the windows of the house I'd been paying for, I realized it might just be the beginning of something else entirely, something that belonged only to me. I should have known they wouldn't let it go. My family had never been good at accepting no as a complete sentence, especially when that no interfered with their plans to use me as their personal support system. The confrontation came 3 days later, on Sunday evening. I'd spent the weekend in blissful solitude, meal prepping for the week, doing my own laundry for once, and researching coastal cabin rentals for my birthday trip, for 48 hours. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to exist without the constant weight of other people's expectations pressing down on my shoulders. But Sunday meant grocery day for the Oakwood Drive house, a routine so deeply ingrained that I found myself pulling into their driveway at 6:30 without even thinking about it. Old habits die hard, and this particular habit had been slowly killing me for over 2 years. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew something was different. Mom and Megan were sitting together on the couch, actually sitting together, not just occupying the same space while staring at separate screens. They looked like they'd been waiting for me, their faces wearing identical expressions of grim determination. "Rachel," Mom said, gesturing to the armchair across from them like she was calling a meeting to order. "We need to talk." I remained standing, car keys still clutched in my hand. "About what?" "About your attitude this week," Megan said, crossing her arms over her chest. "About your complete lack of consideration for anyone but yourself." The accusation was so absurd it actually made me laugh, a short, bitter sound that seemed to surprise all three of us. "My lack of consideration. That's rich, coming from you. Don't you dare take that tone with us," Mom snapped, her disability apparently forgotten as she leaned forward aggressively. "We've been more than patient with your selfishness, but this has gone too far." "What exactly has gone too far?" "My refusal to cancel my birthday plans so I can babysit your house while you vacation in paradise." "It's not babysitting," Megan said, her voice rising to that familiar whine. "It's family responsibility. It's what adults do for each other." "Adults?" I looked between them. These two women who between them couldn't manage to keep food in their refrigerator or bills paid on time. Adults don't expect their family members to bankroll their entire lives. Adults don't throw tantrums when someone sets a boundary. "Boundary?" Mom's voice dripped with disdain. "Is that what you're calling this, some kind of therapy nonsense you picked up from the internet?" The dismissal stung, but it also clarified something important. They weren't interested in understanding my perspective or respecting my needs. This wasn't a conversation, it was an intervention designed to break down my resistance and restore me to my role as their unpaid servant. "Rachel," Megan said, switching tactics to the fake sweet voice she'd perfected in childhood. "Look, I know we haven't always been the best at saying thank you for everything you do, but you have to understand, we need you. Tyler needs his routine. Mom needs her medications managed. The house needs someone responsible looking after it. Then maybe you should learn to be responsible yourself." "I am being responsible," she exploded, abandoning the sweet act entirely. "I'm trying to give my son a chance to see the ocean for the first time in his life. I'm trying to make sure Mom gets the vacation she deserves after everything she's been through, and you're sabotaging all of that because you want to go sit alone in some cabin like a hermit." "I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm just not participating." "Same difference," Mom muttered. I felt something hot and sharp building in my chest, like pressure in a boiler that's been running too long without maintenance. You know what, you're right. Let me tell you exactly how responsible I've been. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, scrolling through months of automatic payments while they watched with growing unease. Mortgage payments $1,800 a month for 28 months. That's $50,400. Electric bill averaging $130 monthly. Gas averaging $90. Water and sewer $65. Trash pickup $25. Internet $70. Cable package $120. That's another $12,000 just in utilities. Megan's face was getting paler with each number I recited. Groceries, household supplies, emergency repairs, Tyler's school supplies and clothes. I kept scrolling, adding up the damage to my financial future. Grand total $93,218 in the past 28 months. That's not including gas money for my daily trips over here or the cost of my time. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the television seemed to have muted itself in shock. We never asked you to, Megan started. You never asked because you never had to ask. I shouted, finally letting years of suppressed frustration explode into the open. You just expected it. You treated my money like it was community property and my time like it was worthless. That's enough, Mom said sharply. Lower your voice. The neighbors will hear. Good. Maybe the neighbors should hear about how you've been financially abusing your daughter for over 2 years. Financial abuse. Megan laughed, but it sounded forced and hysterical. You're being completely ridiculous. Nobody forced you to pay for anything. You chose to help us because that's what family does. I chose to help you because I loved you and I thought you were going through a rough patch. I didn't choose to become your permanent ATM. Well, if that's how you really feel about us, Mom said, her voice cold as winter rain, maybe you should just stop coming around altogether. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. It was meant to scare me back into compliance, to make me choose between my boundaries and my family. For over 2 years, that threat would have worked. The thought of losing them, of being alone, would have sent me scrambling back to my role as their financial and emotional support system. But something had shifted in me since Thursday night. Maybe it was Megan's casual cruelty about my appearance, or Mom's dismissal of my birthday plans, or the simple mathematics of how much of my life I'd sacrificed for people who couldn't even be bothered to say thank you. You know what? I said quietly. Maybe I should. Megan's face went white. Rachel, you don't mean that. I think I do. The words felt strange in my mouth, like speaking a foreign language I was just learning to pronounce. Maybe it's time I started living my own life instead of subsidizing yours. You ungrateful little bitch, Megan snarled, jumping up from the couch so fast she knocked over her soda can. After everything we've done for you, everything Mom sacrificed raising you, what exactly did you sacrifice? I asked, genuinely curious. Because I've been keeping pretty detailed records, and I can't find any evidence of sacrifice on your part. That's when she hit me. The slap came so fast I didn't have time to duck or defend myself. Her palm connected with my left cheek with a sharp crack that seemed to echo in the suddenly silent room. The sting was immediate and shocking, but it was nothing compared to the cold, crystalline clarity that followed. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat radiating from the spot where her hand had made contact. When I looked up, Megan was standing over me with her hand still raised, her face twisted with a rage that was equal parts fury and panic. Megan! Mom's voice carried shock, but not condemnation, not protection for the daughter who'd just been assaulted, just surprise that things had escalated so quickly. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to say something else, waiting for her to defend me, to demand that Megan apologize, to show even a flicker of the maternal protection I'd been craving my entire life. She said nothing. I stood up slowly, my cheek still burning, and looked at these 2 women who shared my DNA but had never truly been my family. In that moment, with perfect clarity, I understood that I had been alone all along. I'd just been too afraid to admit it. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Thank you." Megan's voice cracked with confusion. "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. Thank you for making this easy." I walked to the door, my steps steady and sure for the first time in years. Behind me, I could hear Megan starting to cry, and Mom calling my name with something that might have been regret, but I didn't turn around. I'd spent over 2 years looking backward, trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed, trying to love people who saw love as weakness to be exploited. It was time to look forward. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my tiny kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the blue glow of my online banking dashboard while my left cheek slowly faded from bright red to a dull, throbbing reminder of exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy of respect. The slap had been a gift, really. It had stripped away every last illusion I'd been clinging to about love and loyalty and family bonds. Megan hadn't hit me in a moment of passion or temporary insanity. She'd hit me because she genuinely believed she had the right to, because in her mind, I was property that had malfunctioned, a servant who'd forgotten her place. At 2:47 in the morning, I started making phone calls. "Thank you for calling Brookford Credit Union. This is Marcus speaking. How can I help you today?" "I need to cancel all automatic payments from my checking account," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected it to be. "All of them." "Certainly, ma'am. For security purposes, I'll need to verify your account information." It took 17 minutes to cancel the mortgage autopay, 17 minutes to sever the financial umbilical cord that had been slowly bleeding me dry for over 2 years. Marcus was professional and efficient, asking no questions about why I was making such a dramatic change at 3 in the morning on a Monday. The electric company was next, then gas, then water and sewer. Each cancellation felt like removing a leech that had been attached to my bank account, sucking away my future one monthly payment at a time. The customer service representatives were sleepy and irritated at the ungodly hour, but they processed my requests without argument. By 4:30, I'd systematically dismantled the entire financial structure that had been keeping the Oakwood Drive house operational. No more automatic mortgage payments. No more utility bills appearing magically in my online banking. No more grocery delivery subscriptions or streaming services or cell phone family plans. I made myself a pot of coffee and sat back down to do some math. Over the past 28 months, I'd been automatically sending $2,347 to various companies on behalf of people who'd never asked me to and never thanked me for it. Multiply that by 12 months, and I'd been hemorrhaging over $28,000 a year to subsidize their lifestyle. But that wasn't even the complete picture. There were the grocery runs, the emergency car repairs for Mom's ancient Honda, the school clothes for Tyler, the birthday presents and Christmas gifts that came out of my pocket because money's tight this month, was Megan's permanent excuse for everything. I opened a spreadsheet and started itemizing everything I could remember. The new water heater when theirs died last January, $800. Tyler's winter coat and boots, $120. The emergency plumber when their kitchen sink exploded, $350. Megan's loan to cover her portion of Tyler's class trip to the zoo money I'd never seen again, $75. By 6 in the morning, I had a comprehensive accounting of my financial martyrdom. The grand total made my stomach lurch, $104,632. Over $100,000 of my life, my future, my security, handed over to people who'd repaid my generosity with manipulation, guilt, and ultimately, violence. I closed the laptop and walked to my bathroom mirror, examining the faint bruise that was forming along my left cheekbone. In the harsh fluorescent light, I looked exhausted and hollow-eyed, like someone recovering from a long illness, which, I supposed, I was. My phone started buzzing at 7:15. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails piling up as Mom and Megan presumably discovered that their Monday morning routine of taking my money had been interrupted. The first text was from Mom. "Rachel, call me immediately. There's been some kind of mistake with the mortgage payment." Then Megan, "What did you do? The electric company just called saying our payment was declined." Then Mom again, "This is ridiculous." Rachel, whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now fix this before we get into real trouble. I turned the phone to silent and shoved it into my purse. Let them panic. Let them figure out for themselves what it felt like to be responsible for their own lives. I got dressed for work with more care than I'd taken in months, choosing my best blazer and the one pair of shoes that didn't have scuff marks on the toes. If I was going to start over, I might as well look the part. The day at Brookford Insurance passed in a surreal haze of normalcy. I processed claims, answered phones, responded to emails, all while feeling like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Every hour or so, my phone would light up with increasingly frantic messages from Oakwood Drive, but I ignored them all. During my lunch break, I walked 3 blocks to Brookford First National and opened a new savings account, one that only I had access to, one that no automatic payments could touch. I transferred the money I'd been saving for my birthday trip, along with an additional $1,000 from my emergency fund. "This account is just for me," I told the bank teller, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who probably thought I was going through a divorce. "Good for you, honey," she said, stamping my paperwork with an air of quiet approval. "Everyone needs something that's just theirs." By the time I left work at 5:30, my phone showed 37 missed calls and 62 text messages. The early ones were angry, then desperate, then threatening, then angry again. Watching the emotional progression was like observing a case study in the 5 stages of grief. If grief were entirely selfish and focused on the loss of someone else's money, I drove home to my own apartment, my tiny, supposedly depressing apartment that suddenly felt like a sanctuary. For the first time in over 2 years, I had nowhere else to be. No groceries to buy for other people, no dinners to cook, no homework to supervise, no bills to review. I ordered Thai food from my favorite restaurant and ate it slowly while watching a movie I'd been wanting to see for months. When my phone buzzed with another angry text, I turned it off entirely and put it in a drawer. The silence was profound. No demands, no guilt trips, no crises that required my immediate attention and financial intervention. Just me, in my own space, eating food I'd bought for myself with money I'd earned. Around 9 o'clock, someone knocked on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I could see Megan standing in the hallway, her face blotchy from crying, Tyler's small hand clutched in hers. She knocked again, then pressed her face close to the door. "Rachel, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I sat on my couch and waited. After 5 minutes of increasingly desperate knocking and pleading, she gave up and left. Through my window, I watched her drag Tyler back to her car, her movements sharp with frustration and disbelief. Good. Let her experience what it felt like to have someone refuse to engage with her drama. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror again. The bruise was darker now, a purple shadow along my cheekbone that would probably take a week to fade completely. But for the first time in months, my eyes looked clear and alert instead of dull with exhaustion. I touched the bruise gently, not with pain, but with something like gratitude. That slap had been the last push I'd needed to step off the cliff I'd been standing on for over 2 years, and instead of falling, I'd discovered I could fly. Tomorrow, there would be consequences, angry phone calls, guilt trips, possibly more dramatic confrontations. But tonight, for the first time in 28 months, I went to sleep knowing that every dollar in my bank account belonged to me. The freedom was intoxicating. Tuesday morning brought a fresh wave of panic from Oakwood Drive. By the time I checked my phone at 8:30, there were 14 missed calls and a voicemail from Mom that started with Rachel Marie Carter, in her most authoritative maternal tone, the voice that used to make me scramble to fix whatever I'd supposedly done wrong. Not anymore. The voicemail was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation disguised as practical concern. Mom explained, with barely contained hysteria, that the mortgage company had called about the missed payment, that the electric company was threatening disconnection, and that this little tantrum needed to end before it caused permanent damage to the family. The family. As if what we'd had could be called a family instead of a financial hostage situation. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the end and made a decision that would have terrified me a week ago. I was going to make this permanent. Not just the canceled payments, but the complete severing of financial ties. If I was going to burn this bridge, I needed to make sure it couldn't be rebuilt the moment I weakened or they escalated their guilt campaign. During my lunch break, I drove downtown to the small law office I'd found through a Google search. Langford and Associates. Family law. The building was older but well-maintained, with the kind of understated professionalism that suggested competence without pretension. Exactly what I needed. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a warm smile, looked up from her computer as I approached. "How can we help you today?" "I need to speak with someone about financial separation from family members," I said, realizing how strange that sounded. Legal protection against being forced to provide financial support. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested this wasn't the weirdest request she'd heard that week. "Let me see if Mr. Langford has any availability this afternoon." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from James Langford, a man in his early 60s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades listening to people's domestic disasters. His office was lined with law books and family photos, creating an atmosphere that was both professional and reassuring. "Ms. Carter," he said, settling back in his leather chair. "My understanding is that you're looking for legal protection from family members who expect financial support. Can you give me some details about your situation?" I told him everything: the mortgage payments, the utilities, the groceries, the steady drain of over $100,000 across 28 months, the expectation that I would house sit during their vacation, the slap when I refused, the complete absence of gratitude or reciprocity. Mr. Langford listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, reviewing his notes. "Ms. Carter, what you're describing sounds like what we call financial exploitation by family members. It's more common than you might think, and yes, there are legal steps we can take to protect you going forward." Relief flooded through me so suddenly I felt dizzy. "Really, absolutely. The key is establishing clear boundaries and creating a legal record of your intent to discontinue financial support. This protects you from future claims that you somehow owe them continued assistance." He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began sketching out options. "We can draft what's called a cessation of financial support declaration. It's a legal document that formally notifies your family members that any previous financial assistance was voluntary and that you're under no obligation to continue providing support. It also establishes that any future assistance, should you choose to provide it, would be entirely at your discretion." Is that legally binding? It is. More importantly, it creates a paper trail that protects you if they try to claim you have some kind of legal obligation to support them, or if they attempt to access your finances without permission. He looked up from his notes. "Have they ever had access to your bank accounts or credit cards?" "No. Everything was done through automatic payments from my own accounts." "Good. That makes this much cleaner." He flipped to a new page. "I'd also recommend we include language about harassment and contact restrictions. If they're threatening you or showing up at your home uninvited, we can establish legal grounds for a restraining order if it becomes necessary." The thought of needing a restraining order against my own family should have been heartbreaking. Instead, it felt like putting on armor. How quickly can this be done?" "I can have the declaration drafted by tomorrow morning. Once you review and sign it, we'll send certified copies to each family member. The document takes effect immediately upon their receipt." "And there's no way they can force me to resume the payments?" Mr. Langford's expression was grim but reassuring. "Ms. Carter, unless you co-signed for their mortgage or utilities, or unless there's some written agreement obligating you to provide support, they have absolutely no legal claim to your money. What you've been doing for the past 2 years was generous to the point of self-harm, But it was entirely voluntary. Self-harm. That's exactly what it had been, a slow, steady destruction of my financial future, dressed up as family loyalty. What about emotional arguments, guilt trips about family responsibility? He smiled, and I caught a glimpse of someone who'd probably dealt with his own share of manipulative relatives. Ms. Carter. Feeling guilty doesn't create legal obligation. Love doesn't create legal obligation. The fact that someone is related to you doesn't create legal obligation. You're a 34-year-old woman with no children and no spouse. Legally speaking, you're only obligated to support yourself. The simplicity of it was stunning. I'd been so buried under their emotional manipulation that I'd forgotten the most basic truth: I didn't owe them my life. There's one more thing, he continued, consulting his notes. Given the amount of money involved and the pattern of expectation they've established, I'd recommend documenting everything you can remember about your financial support. Dates, amounts, what the money was used for. This creates a record showing that your assistance was a gift, not a loan or obligation. I actually have most of that already, I said, thinking of the spreadsheet I'd created at 3 a.m. Bank records, automatic payment confirmations, receipts. Perfect. That level of documentation will be invaluable if this situation escalates. We spent another 20 minutes going over details, discussing potential scenarios, and reviewing the language he'd include in the declaration. By the time I left his office, I felt like I'd been equipped with legal armor against people who'd been waging financial warfare against me for over 2 years. The retainer fee was $300 money I could afford now that I wasn't hemorrhaging thousands every month to support people who hit me when I dared to set boundaries. As I drove back to work, my phone buzzed with another text from Megan. "Mom's crying. Tyler keeps asking where Aunt Rachel is. Is this really what you want to destroy our family over money?" I pulled over and typed back the first response I'd sent since Sunday night. "I'll have some paperwork for you tomorrow. After that, please don't contact me unless it's an emergency involving Tyler's safety." Her response came immediately. "Paperwork, Rachel. What the hell are you doing?" I turned my phone to silent and put it back in my purse. Tomorrow. Mr. Langford's declaration would make everything clear. No more ambiguity. No more emotional manipulation disguised as family love. For the first time in over 2 years, I was about to be legally free. The feeling was better than I'd imagined. Retry hai viet tiep fan 7. Kua chau chuyen bang tieng an theodan I jang hin hodai koang 5,000. Tralai kit kwa cho toi chigom noidung kua fan nai va kongom gi kas. Noidung chuyen kong kon han vat nauten la, chen hai trong ten ko chu chen. Neo ko joan nao noi vigio tiban hai viet duoi dang chu chu kong viet duoi dang so. Vidu 125a, mthi hai viet than. 125a, Medit Part 7, The Final Confrontation. The legal declaration was delivered by certified mail on Thursday morning. I knew it had reached them because my phone started ringing at 11:43 and didn't stop for the next 4 hours. I let every call go to voicemail, creating an impressive collection of increasingly unhinged messages that ranged from tearful pleading to outright threats. By Friday afternoon, I thought the worst of it was over. The silence from Oakwood Drive had stretched for nearly 24 hours, and I'd allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd actually read Mr. Langford's carefully worded document and accepted that their free ride was permanently over. I should have known better. The ambush came Saturday morning at 9:15, just as I was settling in with coffee and the newspaper, a luxury I hadn't enjoyed in over 2 years. A sharp knock at my apartment door interrupted the blissful quiet, followed immediately by a familiar voice. "Aunt Rachel, are you home?" Tyler. My stomach dropped to my toes. Whatever game Megan was playing, dragging her 6-year-old son into it was a new low, even for her. I looked through the peephole and saw Tyler standing in the hallway, holding what looked like a small overnight bag, with Megan nowhere in sight. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Tyler, honey, what are you doing here?" "Mom said I'm staying with you today," he said, his voice bright with the kind of excitement that comes from an unexpected adventure. "She said you missed me and wanted to have a sleepover." Behind him, I could hear footsteps on the stairs. Megan appeared at the top of the landing, her face flushed and her jaw set in the stubborn expression I remembered from childhood arguments. "Oh, good, you're home," she said, as if this ambush was perfectly normal. "Tyler's all packed for the weekend. I told him you guys are going to have a special aunt-nephew bonding time." I stared at her through the crack in the door, hardly believing the audacity. "I'm not babysitting." "It's not babysitting, it's family time," she said, her voice taking on that familiar wheedling tone. "Besides, I already made plans. Derek and I are going to Portland for the weekend. His friend got us tickets to some concert thing." "Then take Tyler with you or find another babysitter." Tyler's face fell, his excitement crumbling into confusion. "Aunt Rachel, don't you want to hang out with me?" The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting, using Tyler's disappointment as emotional blackmail, counting on my love for him to override my newly established boundaries. "Tyler, sweetheart," I said, crouching down to his eye level while keeping the door mostly closed. "I love spending time with you, but your mom didn't ask me if today was a good day for a visit. Adults need to plan these things together first." "But Mom said." "I know what Mom said." I looked up at Megan, who was standing behind her son with her arms crossed and an expression that dared me to disappoint a 6-year-old. But Mom was wrong. "Rachel, don't be ridiculous," Megan snapped. "It's one weekend. You don't have anything else going on anyway." "How would you know what I have going on?" "Because you never have anything going on. You work all week and then sit alone in this depressing apartment watching Netflix. At least if you watch Tyler, you'd be doing something useful with your pathetic existence." The words hit like physical blows, each one designed to find the soft spots in my self-esteem and tear them open. For a moment, I felt the familiar rush of shame and self-doubt that had kept me trapped in their dysfunction for so long. Then I remembered the bruise on my cheek, now faded to a yellowish shadow but still visible if you knew where to look. "Tyler," I said gently, "can you go sit on the stairs for a minute? I need to talk to your mom about grown-up stuff." He nodded and plopped down on the top step, pulling a small action figure from his pocket and immediately becoming absorbed in some elaborate imaginary adventure. I closed the door, undid the chain, and stepped into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind me. Megan's triumphant smile faded when she realized Tyler couldn't hear our conversation anymore. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am not taking Tyler today. I am not providing childcare while you run off to Portland with your unemployed boyfriend. If you had plans that required a babysitter, you should have arranged for a babysitter. You're his aunt." "Yes, I am, and because I'm his aunt, I want him to learn that responsible adults don't dump their children on other people without permission. I want him to see that people who love him respect his needs enough to plan properly for his care." Megan's face was getting redder by the second. "This is insane. Rachel, you're punishing a little boy because you're mad at me." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm establishing boundaries that should have been in place years ago." I glanced over at Tyler, who was making quiet whooshing sounds as his action figure flew through the air. "Tyler deserves a mother who plans ahead and respects other people's time. He deserves better than being used as a guilt trip." "Fine," Megan snarled. "Fine. We won't go to Portland. Tyler and I will just sit at home all weekend doing nothing because his selfish aunt can't be bothered to help out for one day. Or you could take him to the park, or the library, or any of the dozens of free activities available to parents who actually parent their children instead of pawning them off on relatives." She stared at me like I'd suggested she climb Mount Everest barefoot. The idea of spending a weekend actually entertaining her own child was apparently as foreign to her as quantum physics. "You've changed," she said finally, her voice dripping with disgust. "Ever since you started this whole legal drama, you've become someone I don't even recognize. The Rachel I knew cared about family. The Rachel you knew was being used and abused by people who mistook her love for weakness," I replied. "That Rachel is gone." "Good," she shouted, apparently forgetting about Tyler's presence, because that Rachel was pathetic anyway, always trying so hard to be needed, always throwing money at problems, always acting like she was so much better than everyone else. Tyler looked up from his toy, his small face creased with worry. "Mom, why are you yelling?" The question seemed to snap Megan back to reality. She glanced down at her son, then back at me, her expression cycling through anger, frustration, and something that might have been panic. "Come on, Tyler," she said, grabbing his hand and pulling him to his feet. "We're leaving. Aunt Rachel is too busy to spend time with us." "But what about the sleepover?" "There's no sleepover, baby. Aunt Rachel doesn't want to have sleepovers anymore." I watched her drag him toward the stairs, using his disappointment as one final weapon against me. At the landing, she turned back. "This isn't over. Rachel, family doesn't just stop being family because you sign some legal papers." "You're right," I said, "but ATMs stop being ATMs the moment you cut off their power." The sound of their footsteps echoing down the stairwell was followed by the slam of the building's front door. I stood in the empty hallway for a long moment, listening to the silence that followed. Back in my apartment, I poured myself another cup of coffee and returned to my newspaper. My hands were shaking slightly adrenaline from the confrontation, but underneath the physical reaction was something I hadn't felt in years: peace. For the first time since Tyler was born, I'd chosen my own well-being over my family's convenience. I'd refused to be manipulated by a 6-year-old's disappointment or terrorized by a 28-year-old's tantrum. I was finally, truly free, and it felt incredible. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the marble lobby of Brookford First National, watching as the bank manager processed the final paperwork for my new investment account. The document in her hands represented something I'd never thought possible: financial security that belonged entirely to me. "This is quite an impressive initial deposit, Ms. Carter," she said with genuine admiration. $28,000 is an excellent foundation for a diversified portfolio." $28,000. Exactly 1 year's worth of the money I'd been hemorrhaging to support people who'd repaid my generosity with violence and manipulation. In just 3 weeks of not paying their bills, I'd managed to save more money than I had in the previous 2 years combined. The irony was beautiful. My phone had been blissfully quiet for the past 10 days. The final communication from Oakwood Drive had been an email from Mom, sent at 2:37 in the morning. That managed to be simultaneously pathetic and threatening. She'd informed me that they were managing just fine without my help, while also warning that I'd regret abandoning family when I needed them most. The email had gone straight to a folder I'd created specifically for their communications evidence that Mr. Langford had recommended I preserve, just in case. But reading it had felt like watching a storm from inside a warm, dry house. Their chaos couldn't touch me anymore. They had managed to find the money for their bills. Of course, people always did when their survival depended on it. Mom had apparently sold her collection of QVC jewelry and home shopping impulse purchases, while Megan had been forced to take a full-time retail position at the mall. Derek had even found part-time work at a warehouse, though according to the neighborhood gossip network that reached me through my coworker Sandra, he complained loudly and frequently about the injustice of having to show up somewhere 5 days a week. The mortgage was current, the utilities were on, and Tyler was being fed and clothed. Amazing what people could accomplish when they stopped expecting someone else to subsidize their dysfunction. I'd heard through the same gossip network that their Hawaii trip had been quietly canceled. The timeshare deal had mysteriously fallen through, according to Megan's dramatic social media posts about fake friends and unfair circumstances. In reality, they'd probably realized that a vacation was harder to justify when you were suddenly responsible for your own basic living expenses. As I walked out of the bank and into the crisp October afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation for my own future. In 2 days, I would be driving to the coast for my birthday weekend, the trip that had started this whole chain of liberation. I'd booked the cabin in Cannon Beach, the one with the ocean view and the fireplace, and for 3 glorious days I would read books, take long walks, and exist entirely for my own pleasure. The person I'd been a month ago would have felt guilty about the money I was spending on myself. She would have calculated how many mortgage payments that cabin rental represented, how many grocery runs, how many utility bills. But that person had died the moment Megan's hand connected with my face, and the woman who'd emerged from her ashes had different priorities. My apartment, which Megan had dismissed as depressing, had been transformed over the past 3 weeks. With money to spend on myself for the first time in years, I'd bought new throw pillows for the couch, plants for the windowsill, and art for the walls. Small changes, but they'd turned my space from a place I merely slept into a home I actually enjoyed inhabiting. I'd also bought new clothes, professional blazers that weren't clearance rack afterthoughts, shoes that didn't have scuff marks, a winter coat that wasn't 3 seasons old. Looking good felt like armor against the world, and I was finally wealthy enough to afford that protection. The best part was the silence. Not just the absence of demanding phone calls and guilt-tripped text messages, but the deeper quiet that came from no longer carrying other people's crises as my own. I slept through the night now, my dreams untroubled by anxiety about mortgage payments and utility deadlines and family members who saw my love as a resource to be mined. At work, my colleagues had started commenting on the change in my demeanor. "You seem lighter," Sandra had said over lunch the previous Tuesday, "like you're not carrying the weight of the world anymore." She was right. For over 2 years, I'd been Atlas, holding up other people's sky while my own world collapsed around me. Finally, setting down that burden had been like learning to breathe again. As I settled into my car for the drive home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my stomach clenched with the old anxiety had they found a new way to contact me, but the message was from Tyler's school. "Ms. Carter, this is Mrs. Patterson, Tyler's teacher. I wanted to let you know that Tyler has been asking about you in class. He seems to miss you quite a bit. I hope everything is okay with your family." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a familiar tug of guilt and love for the one innocent casualty in this whole mess. Tyler didn't understand why his aunt had suddenly disappeared from his life. In his 6-year-old world, people who loved you didn't just vanish, but he would understand someday, when he was older, when he could see the patterns of manipulation and exploitation that had defined his childhood. He would understand that sometimes loving someone means refusing to enable their destruction. He would learn, as I had learned, that real family doesn't hit you for setting boundaries or treat your generosity like an entitlement. I typed back carefully, "Please tell Tyler that I love him very much and that I hope he's working hard in school. Sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions, but that doesn't mean the love goes away." Mrs. Patterson's response came quickly. "I'll make sure he gets the message. Take care of yourself, Ms. Carter." As I drove through downtown Brookford, past the insurance office where I spent my days, and toward the apartment that was finally, truly mine, I thought about revenge. Not the dramatic, explosive kind you see in movies, but the quiet, devastating effectiveness of simply walking away. I hadn't destroyed my family. I'd stopped enabling their self-destruction. I hadn't taken anything from them. I'd stopped giving them things they'd never earned and never appreciated. My revenge was the most complete kind possible, living well without them. The autumn sun was setting as I pulled into my parking space, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded me of the freedom I'd fought so hard to claim. Tomorrow was Friday, and Monday would be my birthday. For the first time in over 2 years, both days belonged entirely to me. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, keys jingling in my hand, and opened the door to my sanctuary. The silence greeted me like an old friend, warm and welcoming and mine. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemies, it's refusing to let them destroy you. And I had won completely. Thank you so much for listening to this story of resilience and self-discovery. I hope Rachel's journey resonated with you and maybe inspired your own courage to set boundaries when needed. I'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from. Are you at home, on your commute, or somewhere else entirely? I love connecting with listeners from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about Rachel's story. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family expectations and your own well-being? Your experiences and insights make this community stronger, so please share them below.